And the ones that have a wider spread are the opposite, that are actually much lower. So ATC is actually a very good way to incorporate some of the parameter risk and minimize it and really harness that.
I have a question for you, Ariel. So you talk about trying to play in all the different buckets, essentially trying to play, if you're drafting a middle infielder, try to play in the, the high end range, try to play in the middle range, try to play in the low range. I'm curious how you feel about that in regards to all the corner infield stuff that we've talked about. Because I feel like, I remember when we were drafting GDD, I feel like we kind of disagreed a little bit. You wanted to play in the high end of the corner infielders. And I'm like, no, let's wait on Joey Votto. Let's wait on Brandon Belt. We didn't get either of them. We drafted Jose Abreu up front, and we got him at a little bit of a discount. But I feel like we missed out on some value because of that. How do you feel? Do you still think that's the right way to do it, or would you make exceptions depending on the actual player pool or the position you're dealing with? I'm curious how you feel about that now.
Yeah, well, I think the goal is not to get somebody at each value point. I think the goal is to be able to play at each value point, is to that if you notice there's value at any price point, be able to jump on it. So I wouldn't lock into, well, I know there's value here, so I'm only going to play here. If you see value at a different price point than you are used to, you got to jump on it. But that said,
even if you think there's going to be 5 guys that are going to be $10 bargains at the bottom end of first base, you would jump on a $2 bargain at the top.
No, not true.
Okay.
So when you're doing your planning, and if you anticipate that there's going to be great value at the bottom for corner infielder, then 100% you need to say, I'm going to save that roster spot because I'm going to maximize it that way. Part of the prep in drafting an auction is to say which positions or which categories, right, could be steals guys, do I think I'm going to get the most value at which price points? And that's the way that you need to plan your draft. Sure, if you get a $7 bargain up top of the corner, you got to take that.
Right.
But you recognize that it's there, and in general, your threshold for acceptable return on top goes down.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
It's to change the threshold. It's like at the end, I find at the end of auctions where, there's always bargains at the end of auctions. And the question is, who do I spend on? You say, wait a minute. You got to wait for the player that's going to maximize return. I need a $5 return at this point. And even though a guy is 3, you say, I can do better. And if the guy is 5, you grab him, you say, I'm not going to do better. Right? You have to know what your possible return is at the bottom. I find knowing what you can get and what you can miss, that's you got to be able to gauge it, and that's one way you can win an auction. All right, well, this has been a really, really great show. Oh, you got another question?
Yep.
All right, last question. Go for it.
So you guys are both amazing in the analytical projections. Obviously, that's why we're all here. When, if ever, do you say, screw it, this is wrong, I like this guy?
Why are you saying that? And I don't mean that in a glib way.
No. I'm honestly curious. When, if ever, do you do that?
My question is, why would you do it? And I say that because you need a good reason for it. You wouldn't just say it, just be, oh, I'm a Giants fan, I'm going to draft Brandon Crawford really high this year because I like Brandon Crawford. You need a reason. What is the reason that the projection is not accounting for?
I've done that. 2 years ago, I had a hunch on Chris Paddock. I thought he was I thought his value was high, but I thought he was worth a little bit more. So I saw the way he was pitching in spring. I said, you know what? I'm going to go the extra $1. I'm going to go extra $2. I'm going to go the extra $3. And I think I was in a league with you, and I picked Chris Paddock, and I picked him early, and people were like, what are you doing? And I said, I have a hunch. Sometimes, I know both of you hate it, but sometimes a gut feeling does pay off.
Yeah, I will never draft based on gut. If your answer to my question, if you're thinking about a guy like, oh, when should I go off projections? Well, I have this gut feeling.
Yeah.
I love you, Ruvain, but I would say no. Don't do that. Don't go on a gut feeling.
I'll give you a scenario where you should. It's the playing time. If you think that a guy is going to get more playing time, then that's a reason to say, I'm going to pump up his playing time 100 at-bats and go with that value and calculate it. That's a reason, or the opposite if he's going. That's the biggest reason. I think that the human eye, unless you know there's a new swing of this, sure. But other than that, I think projections do the better job than the naked eye most of the time, not in playing time. I think that following the team, knowing the stuff, that is better. And I'll tell you that in the ATC projections, the more manual-based projection systems are counted more in the playing time formula, and the more automated ones are counting more in the rate formula. So that's what I would do is when you have hunches in playing time, go for that.
Yeah, playing time is definitely the big one. Scouting type stuff, projections aren't factoring in scouting reports because we don't have them. If, you work for a major league club, their projections are going to be factoring in scouting reports. That being said, you have to be really careful if you're going to try to factor in a scouting take because, most of us are not trained scouts. Most of us, maybe we think we see something, but do we really? Is it, so it's tough. The projections by and large are going to be much more accurate than gut feelings, than, armchair quarterback or whatever you want to call it, like scouting, watching on TV and saying, oh, well, I think this guy looks really sharp, during spring training. I'm just going to take him higher or whatever. All
right. It's time for the Injury Gurus report. Let's go for it, Ruben.
Where do we start? We'll start with Jacob deGrom. He last pitched on July 7th. He was told, or people say, he had a partial tear in his UCL. He said he was fine. He did have Tommy John surgery back in October 2010. He was ramping up the end of the year. They shut him down because the Mets weren't in it, unfortunately. So the question is where you get him in value next year. That's the main question. Mike Trout hasn't played since May 17th. It's a calf injury. He should be fine for next year, but everyone remembers Josh Donaldson. Calf injury can pop up at any time. Brian Hayes met with a hand specialist last week and is expected to meet with another one in the coming weeks. He has a cyst on his left hand that has contributed to his recurring wrist, hand, and soreness. He may need surgery. If it's done, he may be ready for next year. Clayton Kershaw, he received a PRP injection last week. He was ruled out for the playoffs, and surgery is trying to be avoided. We'll see. He is 33, turning 34 with almost 2,500 innings on his arm. We'll see how that goes. Mike Clevenger, he was noted to be throwing from 75 to 90 feet. He remains on track to start next year on time. He had Tommy John surgery November of last year. Dustin May, he may be back second half next year, but if you want to take another risk like people did on Syndergaard and Sale, be my guest. Tyler Glasnow, out for next year completely. He's having the Tommy John surgery. The reason I mention it is because he is a Ray. He may get traded. Justin Verlander, he had Tommy John surgery September of last year. He should be fine for next year. Jordan Hicks, the Cardinals announced that he's supposed to play here in Arizona, so we'll see how he goes. He goes very up and down. We don't know him. James Paxton, he's been throwing from 60 feet so far. He's lost the complete last this year for Tommy John. He had Tommy John surgery in April. Same goes for next year. Maybe get him in the second half, maybe not. I don't know if you want to do that. Steven Strasburg is supposed to begin throwing in November. He's recovering from thoracic outlet surgery. He had it back in July. We'll see how that goes. Kyle Lewis had a bone bruise in his right knee, and he was shut down for the season. He had a torn meniscus, and he had surgery in June. He should be back next year, and he should be fine. Brian Anderson had shoulder surgery to repair his left shoulder capsule. He missed the end of last year. He should be okay, and he's expected to be ready for February to be back. Rhys Hoskins, he was out with an abdominal issue. He had surgery. It sounds like it was a sports hernia. They didn't really announce it. He should be good for spring training. Aaron Hicks. Yes, Aaron Hicks still plays, and he's under contract to 2025 as a starting center fielder for the New York Yankees. Good luck with that. He was placed on the IL in May, diagnosed with a torn wrist tendon. He had surgery. We'll see how that goes. Mike Moustakas had a heel injury. It turned into a hip injury. It turned into plantar fasciitis. He tried to come back, but plantar fasciitis can last for a long time. It can linger. He needed rest. He's going to get it, and he should be fine for next year.
All right. Well, that is quite an injury report there and quite a show. First of all, thank you, everyone, for joining the show here. Thank you to our guest, Derek Carty. Derek, why don't you just tell us where we can see all your stuff and see the Bad X and everything?
Yeah, the Bat and the Bad X you can find at various places for various purposes. For season long at Fangraphs, for DFS at Roto Grinders, for sports betting at EV Analytics.
All right, Ruben.
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates on a daily, during the offseason on a weekly basis. And during the season, I also have a weekly article discussing all these injuries on Rotoballer.
All right, my name's Ariel Cohen. You can see my stuff over at Fangraphs and at Rotoballer. Going to be doing a bunch of wrap-up articles for the season, talking about interprojection volatility, talking about the best projections of the year, talking about some scarcity of positions and market premiums and whatnot. So check those out in the coming months. The season's over, but my work is just starting. And you can follow me on Twitter at ATCNY. And, of course, you can listen to me right here on the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs each and every week. All right, from all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.